What does it take to change the world? Genius? Determination? Personal sacrifice? Marie Curie embodied all three. She wasn't just a scientist. She was a pioneer, a rule breaker, and a woman who defied the odds in a world that tried to hold her back. Born in Russian-occupied Poland, where women were barred from higher education, she fought relentlessly for knowledge, eventually moving to Paris to study at the Sorbonne. There she would make history, not just as the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, but as the first person ever to win two. Her discoveries, radium and polonium, transformed science, unlocking the secrets of radioactivity and laying the foundation for modern cancer treatments. Yet despite her groundbreaking achievements, Marie refused to patent her work, believing that science should serve humanity, not profit. But behind the brilliance was a life of hardship, scandals, and devastating loss. Her discoveries redefined science, but they also came at a terrible cost, one that would ultimately claim her life. This is the incredible, groundbreaking, and heartbreaking story of Marie Curie, a woman who lit up the world even as it slowly consumed her. Maria Skłodowska, nicknamed Mania, was born on November 7, 1867, in Warsaw, then under Russian rule. She was the youngest of 5 children, growing up with her siblings Zofia, Józef, Bronisława, known as Bronia, and Helena, in a household shaped by both intellectual ambition and hardship. Her parents, Bronisława and Władysław Skłodowski, were dedicated educators, but their family had lost wealth and status due to their involvement in Polish independence uprisings. Władysław, a mathematics and physics teacher, encouraged his children's education, bringing home scientific instruments after Russian authorities banned laboratory instruction from Polish schools. Maria, precocious and curious, was drawn to these tools, unknowingly stepping into a future of scientific discovery. Her mother, Bronisława, had once run a prestigious girls' school, but left her career to raise her children. However, tuberculosis weakened her for years, casting a shadow over Mania's early life. Meanwhile, her father's pro-Polish sentiments cost him his job, and a failed investment left them struggling financially. To survive, the family took in boarders, turning their home into a makeshift lodging house. Tragedy struck the family repeatedly. In 1876, Zofia contracted typhus from a boarder and died, leaving the family devastated. 2 years later, Bronisława succumbed to tuberculosis, further deepening their grief. These losses shattered 10-year-old Mania, leading her to question her faith and eventually abandon Catholicism. Despite hardship, Mania excelled in school. At 10, she attended a girls' gymnasium, graduating in 1883 with a gold medal. Growing up under Russian rule, she witnessed the suppression of Polish culture firsthand. Her father, defiant in subtle ways, once humiliated a Russian school official, an act that cost him his job. Despite their grief, the Skłodowski children remained determined. By 1882, Joseph studied medicine, Bronia graduated with honors, and Mania, excelling at the gymnasium, longed for an education beyond the restrictions placed on women. Their new home on Leshin Street offered some peace, but Mania's hunger for knowledge only grew. Each morning, Mania met her best friend, Kazia Przyborowska, at the Blue Palace. At their Russian-controlled gymnasium, discipline was strict, and Polish culture was suppressed, but Mania and Kazia rebelled, clashing with the harsh superintendent, Mademoiselle Mayer. Their defiance peaked when they were caught dancing on their desks, celebrating Tsar Alexander II's assassination. Tragedy soon overshadowed their rebellion. When their classmate Kanika's brother was sentenced to death for plotting against the Tsar, Mania and her friends gathered in silent mourning, kneeling in prayer before his execution. Despite the turmoil, Mania excelled, graduating with honors on June 12, 1883. She dismissed the Russian prize books as horrible, and her father rewarded her with a rare gift, a year of rest in the countryside. In Zwolle, Mania abandoned academics, spending carefree days tutoring, swimming, and climbing trees. She experienced the thrill of Polish winter carnivals, torchlit sleigh rides, and dancing until dawn. She fell in love with the countryside, marveling at the Carpathian Mountains and riding horses across her uncle's estate. That summer, she and Hella joined mischievous friends at Kempa, stealing gooseberries and attending endless festivities. At a grand ball, Manya danced in new russet leather shoes until dawn, wearing them through, a memory she later cherished. But childhood ended in September 1884. Returning to Warsaw, she found her family in a smaller apartment, her father aging and their financial struggles worsening. His lost fortune weighed on him, but his children remained determined. "We are young. We are strong. We will succeed." With money tight, Manya took up tutoring, enduring long hours and unreliable pay. Yet, she sought more than survival. She found purpose in positivism, believing education and science could uplift Poland. Through her mentor, Mademoiselle Piasecka, Manya joined the clandestine floating university, where she and Brania attended forbidden science and philosophy lectures. She tutored working-class women, built a Polish language library, but refused to align with radical politics, believing knowledge, not ideology, was the key to progress. Inspired by Asnick's poetry, she embraced learning as a path to change, take the torch of knowledge, and build the palace of the future. Yet reality was unyielding. The University of Warsaw barred women, and tutoring at half a ruble an hour could never fund her education. Meanwhile, Brania longed to study medicine in Paris, but lacked the means. One day, Manya confronted her sister with a plan. Brania had saved enough for a year at the Sorbonne, but the medical course lasted 5. Manya proposed a solution. Brania would go first, using her own savings, while Manya worked to send her money. Once Brania became a doctor, she would help fund Manya's education in turn. Their father agreed, and in 1885, nearly 18, Manya sought work as a governess. With good references, a good upbringing, and the ability to speak 5 languages, it was not difficult for her to find employment. However, her first position with a wealthy family was disappointing. Their hypocrisy and ignorance clashed with her upbringing, and she soon left. Struggling to earn enough in Warsaw, she took a governess job in the countryside, earning 500 rubles a year. In early 1886, she arrived at Szczuki, where she was employed by the wealthy Żurawski family and befriended Branka, the landowner's eldest daughter. While living with the family, and with the help of Branka, she secretly taught Polish to illiterate peasant children, defying Russian restrictions. Though she longed for intellectual challenge, she studied physics and math by correspondence with her father. In December 1886, she described by letter her grueling schedule, teaching from morning to night, attending to social obligations, and studying late into the night. Her letters hinted at deep discouragement, vague thoughts of suicide, and even a rejection of love. Love, however, had found her. The Żurawski's eldest son, Casimir, home from university, fell for the brilliant, graceful governess who could dance, row, and debate like no other girl he knew. Manya, too, was enchanted, and they secretly planned to marry. But when Casimir told his parents, their outrage was swift. A governess, no matter how brilliant, was not an acceptable match. Though they had always treated her with warmth, the unspoken class divide was suddenly impenetrable. Casimir, lacking the will to fight, surrendered to his family's demands. Manya, heartbroken and humiliated, resolved to erase the dream. But love, like ambition, does not die so easily. Manya remained at Szczuki despite her heartbreak, unable to risk losing her position. Her salary was crucial. She now bore the responsibility of helping fund Brania's medical studies, sending nearly half her earnings each month. By 1888, frustration mounted, her students' progress was slow, and she felt intellectually stifled. Yet she persevered, waiting for a way forward. After 3 years, change arrived. Her father, now retired, took a demanding job, while Brania, studying in Paris, married fellow exile Casimir Dlusky. Manya returned to Warsaw for a brief governess position before receiving life-altering news. Brania invited her to Paris, offering shelter while she saved for tuition. Though torn by duty to her family, she agreed to stay 1 more year to prepare. Back in Warsaw, she reunited with her father, resumed studies at the floating university, and trained in a secret laboratory under her cousin Joseph Boguski. When she met Casimir Żurawski once more in 1891, she saw his hesitation and ended things firmly. Free of attachments, she made her decision. she would go to Paris. With every ruble accounted for, she packed only essentials, booked a fourth-class train ticket, and carried a folding chair for the crowded journey. At the platform, she clung to her father. "I won't be gone long. 2 years, 3 at most." He held her tightly. As the train rattled through Germany, Marie felt only joy. After years of waiting, she was finally on her way to Paris. She arrived at Brognieux's home on Rue Delamagne, mesmerized by the city, but her true wonder was the Sorbonne. On November 3, 1891, she stood before its gates, ready to claim her place in the Faculty of Science. She wrote her name in full for the first time, Marie Sklodowska, a name that would soon become legendary. Determined to prove herself, she immersed in the lectures of great minds like Walter Lippmann and Appel. Though brilliant, she struggled. Her scientific foundation was weaker than her peers, and her French, though fluent, lagged behind rapid lectures. Undeterred, she arrived early, studied late, and pushed herself beyond exhaustion. Mathematics captivated her, revealing the universe's hidden harmony. At home, her independence amused Brognieux's husband Casimir, who joked that she neither obeyed nor respected him. Their household was lively, filled with Polish émigrés and music, including a young pianist, Ignace Paderewski, who would one day lead Poland. But the noise made study impossible. When Brognieux became pregnant, they agreed. Marie would move closer to the Sorbonne. She settled into a tiny, unheated attic at 3 Rue Flattet, embracing a monastic existence. Living on 40 rubles a month, she rationed food, rarely used coal, and walked everywhere. Evenings were spent at the Sainte Geneviève Library, then reading by petroleum lamp late into the night. Malnourished, she often fainted, unaware starvation was the cause. Only when a classmate alerted the Dluskys did Casimir drag her home to recover, but once well, she returned to the same grueling routine. Despite hardships, she thrived in the Sorbonne's laboratories, refining her skills under Professor Lippmann. Pursuing both physics and mathematics, she placed first in her physics master's exam in 1893 and second in mathematics in 1894. She encouraged her brother, writing, "We must believe that we are gifted for something and that this thing, at whatever cost, must be attained." By 1893, financial strain threatened to end her studies, until she won the Alexandrovitch Scholarship, securing 15 more months in Paris. When she later earned her first salary, she repaid the scholarship in full, an act unheard of at the time. These years, though filled with hardship, were the most perfect of her life. She endured freezing winters, layering clothes and piling linens for warmth, but knowledge was worth every sacrifice. Believing love would only distract from science, she resigned herself to solitude. Yet fate had already placed in her path the one man who could match her intellect and devotion. Pierre Curie, a brilliant but unrecognized physicist, had dedicated his life to research, indifferent to ambition or convention. Born in Paris on May 15, 1859, Pierre Curie came from a family of doctors and researchers. Too independent for traditional schooling, he was educated at home, earning a Bachelor of Science by 16 and a Master's in Physics at 18. By 19, he worked alongside his brother Jacques, discovering piezoelectricity, a breakthrough in measuring electrical charges. As chief of the laboratory at the School of Physics and Chemistry in Paris, Pierre pioneered work in crystalline physics, formulated the principle of symmetry, and developed Curie's law in magnetism. Despite his genius, he remained underappreciated in France, earning a modest salary while foreign scientists like William Thomson, 1st Baron Kelvin, recognized his brilliance. Pierre rejected honors and ambition, preferring to work in solitude and integrity. Though deeply reflective, he often struggled with self-doubt, fearing his intellect was fading. A poetic thinker, he sought to turn life into a dream and that dream into reality, a philosophy that guided both his scientific and personal life. At 35, he had never married, believing few women could understand his world. That changed in 1894 when Joseph Kowalski introduced him to Marie, who was seeking laboratory space for her research on magnetism. Their connection was immediate. Science sparked their conversation, but mutual admiration deepened it. As their friendship deepened, Pierre fell in love, but Marie remained uncertain. torn between her devotion to Poland and her growing connection to him. Though she admired him and encouraged his work, she still saw herself as independent. When she left for the summer, his letters followed, filled with affection, philosophy, and quiet longing. He urged her to pursue science over feudal struggles and hinted at a future together. Eventually, he boldly proposed a partnership. If not marriage, could they at least live and work together? If she insisted on returning to Poland, he would follow. Deeply moved, Marie confided in Branya, who saw Pierre's devotion and encouraged her to reconsider. Even his mother pleaded for the match. Pierre, once convinced marriage was a distraction, now believed that theirs would be the perfect union of love and science. By October, she returned to Paris, and after nearly a year of hesitation, Marie finally said yes. On July 26, 1895, they married in a simple civil ceremony. Dressed in a simple navy blue wool suit, chosen for practicality so she could wear it in the laboratory, she prepared for a wedding unlike any other. No white dress, no religious vows, just 2 bicycles as wedding gifts and a honeymoon spent cycling through the French countryside, discussing science and the future. Their love was a fusion of minds as much as hearts. Settling into a modest flat on Rue de la Glacière, their lives revolved around research. Pierre earned 500 francs a month, while Marie balanced scientific work with household duties, applying precision even to cooking. Their days followed a steady rhythm: mornings at the market, long hours in the lab, and evenings studying together, exchanging quiet glances across their wooden table. Life was simple but fulfilling. They cycled to visit Pierre's parents, kept fresh flowers in their home, and celebrated Marie's first-place finish in the 1896 fellowship exam with a grueling cycling expedition through Auvergne. But change came swiftly. Marie became pregnant while Pierre's mother battled breast cancer. In July 1897, her father arrived from Poland to care for her, and in September, she gave birth to their daughter, Irene, who would one day win a Nobel Prize. Ever practical, the Curies noted only minor indulgences: champagne, 3 francs, telegrams, 1 franc 10. The largest expense was simply recorded as illnesses. Marie never saw motherhood and science as conflicting paths. When Irene's health declined, she struggled to nurse her, but following medical advice, stopped. 3 months after giving birth, she published her research on magnetization, refusing to slow down despite concerns for her health. Through it all, her greatest support was Pierre's father. After losing his wife, he devoted himself to Irene, moving in with the young family and becoming the child's first teacher. With his help, Marie pressed on, unwavering in her pursuit of knowledge. By the end of 1897, Marie had earned 2 degrees, secured a fellowship, and published a monograph. Barely recovered from childbirth, she returned to the lab seeking a research topic for her doctorate. Intrigued by Henri Becquerel's discovery of uranium's mysterious rays, she measured its ionization and made a groundbreaking realization: radiation was an inherent atomic property. Expanding her study, she found thorium behaved similarly and coined the term radioactivity for ever-changing science. While testing minerals, she noticed pitchblende emitted far more radiation than its known elements could explain. Convinced it contained a new, highly radioactive substance, she obsessively rechecked her results. Skeptics dismissed her findings, but on April 12, 1898, she announced her discovery. Pierre, captivated, abandoned his own research to join her. That July, they confirmed the first new element. Marie named it polonium, honoring her homeland. As they cycled through the countryside that summer, they pondered the second element. In December, alongside Gustave Beaumont, they unveiled radium, its radioactivity exceeding anything previously observed. The discovery stunned the scientific world, but skeptics demanded proof. Show us radium, and we will believe you. Undeterred, the Curies devised a plan. Instead of costly raw ore, they acquired discarded pitchblende residue from St. Joachimsthal's uranium mines. With no lab, they settled for a decrepit wooden shed at Pierre's School of Physics, leaky, unventilated, and barely fit for storage. When a wagon arrived carrying a ton of ore, Marie plunged her hands into it. Radium was there. She just had to find it. From 1898 to 1902, they endured grueling conditions. Pierre analyzed radium's properties while Marie, covered in dust and acid stains, undertook the exhausting chemical work. Radium was 1,000,000 times scarcer than expected, making extraction nearly impossible, but that only fueled their determination. Despite exhaustion, they found joy in their shared solitude. "We work a lot but sleep well," Marie wrote home. "We have not been to a concert all year, but we feel well." As their discoveries grew, collaborators joined them. Chemist André de Bierne later discovered actinium, while Pierre partnered with Georges Sagnac to study radiation's effects. But Marie bore the brunt of refining pitchblende, refusing to pause despite Pierre's concerns. After 45 months of relentless labor, she triumphed, isolating a decigram of pure radium in 1902 and confirming its atomic weight at 225. The skeptics were silenced. One night, they returned to their darkened lab. In tiny glass containers, radium glowed with an eerie blue phosphorescence. In that glow, they shared a moment of silent triumph. Yet success brought no financial relief. Pierre's salary barely sustained them, and teaching stole time from research. A Sorbonne professorship could have eased their burden, but bureaucratic resistance delayed his appointment until 1904, long after the world had recognized their achievements. By the time the university was ready to support him, death would come for him first. In 1902, Pierre declined a prestigious offer from Geneva, unwilling to abandon radium research. Despite his brilliance, academia remained indifferent. His chair application was rejected, and he lost the Academy of Science election. When offered the Legion of Honor, he refused. "I do not need decorations. I need a laboratory." With no institutional support, the Curies continued working in their dilapidated shed, prioritizing discovery over comfort. Their devotion took a toll. Pierre suffered from crippling leg pain, Marie's weight dropped alarmingly, and friends urged them to rest. Even their vacations were grueling cycling trips. In 1902, Marie rushed to Poland too late to see her father before his death. His final letter expressed pride in her, though he doubted radium's practical use. He would not live to see its revolutionary impact. In 1903, Marie and Pierre, alongside Henri Becquerel, won the Nobel Prize in Physics. The honor came amid exhaustion. Marie, emotionally drained, suffered a miscarriage, while Pierre's pain worsened. Too exhausted to travel, they sent a French official to accept it. Marie mentioned the honor briefly in a letter, focusing instead on Pierre's trip to London and her own illness. The most practical benefit was the 70,000 franc prize, allowing Pierre to leave teaching and hire an assistant. One night, Marie whispered, "If one of us disappeared, the other should not survive." Pierre replied, "Even if one must go on like a body without a soul, one must work just the same." Between 1899 and 1904, the Curies published 32 groundbreaking papers. Scientists like Rutherford and Soddy proved radium's emissions were part of atomic transformation, fundamentally redefining matter. Pierre grasped the magnitude. This is transmutation, not as the alchemists imagined, but governed by immutable laws. Radium's radiation was 2,000,000 times stronger than uranium's, melted ice, glowed blue, and contaminated everything it touched. Even today, Marie's notebooks remain dangerously radioactive. Pierre tested its effects on himself, suffering severe burns. These discoveries led to Curie therapy, the foundation of modern radiation treatment. Despite its commercial value, each gram worth 750,000 gold francs, Marie refused to profit, ensuring radium remained available for research. In 1904, the first radium factory opened, but she preserved the first pure gram for science. On June 25, 1903, Marie defended her thesis, Researches on Radioactive Substances, before a packed Sorbonne hall. Dressed in a simple black dress, she answered every question with quiet authority. When she finished, jury president Lippmann announced, "The University of Paris accords you the title of Doctor of Physical Science with the mention Très Honorable." There was no celebration, but Marie Curie had just cemented her place among the world's greatest scientists. As radium's value soared, industrialists urged the Curies to patent their purification process. Pierre saw financial security in doing so, but Marie refused. It would be contrary to the scientific spirit. That evening, Pierre wrote back, freely sharing their research. Leaving fortune behind, they cycled into the countryside, content with their choice, discovery over wealth. Honors poured in. Pierre lectured at the Royal Institution, while Marie, uncomfortable with attention, preferred their quiet lab. Despite newfound stability, they remained selfless. Marie funded Bronia's sanatorium, supported Polish students, and helped struggling scientists. They rejected lecture tours and banquets, calling it the energy of despair. Fame disrupted their world. Journalists besieged their home, publishing absurd requests, from naming racehorses to poetry about radium. Pierre loathed it all, resenting time stolen from research, while Marie found public attention exhausting. Ironically, only after international recognition did the University of Paris consider offering Pierre a proper position. Desperate for solitude, they fled to remote villages under false names, but reporters followed. One, expecting a distinguished scientist, found Marie barefoot, shaking sand from her shoes. When asked about her life, she simply replied, "In science, we must be interested in things, not in persons." In December 1904, Marie gave birth to Eve, their second daughter. Overwhelmed at first, she slowly regained her strength, balancing research, teaching, and motherhood. Their Boulevard Kellerman residence was modest, their days consumed by research. Pierre, absent-minded, once forgot he had eaten a steak until the maid demanded his opinion. Despite her devotion to work, Marie remained an attentive mother, searching Paris for the only fruit Irene would eat. Evenings were spent reading scientific journals, occasionally interrupted by concerts or theater, always intellectual, never grand. She owned a single black evening gown, carrying herself with quiet grace. One evening, Pierre admired her in formal attire, murmuring, "Evening dress becomes you, but we haven't got time." Despite their solitude, they welcomed fellow scientists, Polish visitors, and festive children's parties. Jean Perrin sang Wagner, Urbain teased Marie about her severe style, and lively debates filled their garden. While radium redefined science, their children played nearby, unaware they would one day follow in their parents' footsteps. France finally acknowledged the Curies. In 1904, Pierre was granted a chair in physics at the Sorbonne, though it lacked a laboratory. He fought for funding, securing 150,000 francs, but most went to construction, leaving little for equipment. Exhausted from juggling research and teaching, he welcomed a rare victory. Marie was finally given an official title and salary, marking the first time she was formally recognized for her groundbreaking work. By June 1905, they finally traveled to Stockholm for their delayed Nobel lecture. Pierre warned of science's dual nature, capable of great good and great harm. Unlike other honors, the trip brought rare pleasure, offering them peace in Sweden's landscapes. Together, they moved to Rue Cuvier, leaving behind their old shed, though they occasionally returned, reminiscing about their early struggles. Pierre prepared lectures while Marie worked with André de Biernt and William Duane, refining radium measurements. Their collaboration was built on mutual admiration, respect, and camaraderie. Unlike many scientific partnerships, theirs was free from rivalry or personal ambition. They exchanged ideas, offered advice, and shared both the joys of discovery and the quiet contentment of working side by side. On April 14, 1906, Pierre wrote, "Madame Curie and I are working." But their peaceful life together was about to come to a sudden and devastating end. On April 19, 1906, Pierre hurriedly called out to Marie before leaving. Hours later, lost in thought, he stepped onto Rue Dauphine, slipping on the wet pavement. A 6-ton horse-drawn wagon crushed his skull instantly. Pierre Curie was dead. His body lay in the street as police struggled to find transport. His skull was shattered, 16 fractures, though his face remained untouched. Rain washed away the blood while bystanders stared in horror. When officials arrived, Pierre's father sensed the truth. Grief overtook him, not just in sorrow, but in anger. He wept bitterly, railing against Pierre's absent-mindedness, blaming his son's wandering thoughts for his tragic fate. Again and again, he murmured despairingly. What was he dreaming of this time? Marie, unaware, returned home to silence. When told, she whispered, "Pierre is dead. Absolutely dead." As if denial could undo fate. Unlike those who openly mourned, her grief was silent, impenetrable. She handled the formalities mechanically, refusing an autopsy, sending a terse telegram to Warsaw. Pierre dead. Result, accident. That night, alone with his body, she kissed his still warm hands, unwilling to let go. At the burial, she covered his coffin in flowers, whispering, "It is the end of everything, everything, everything." Tributes poured in, but Marie recoiled. She advanced the funeral to avoid public spectacle, rejecting state honors. Under her mourning veil, she followed his coffin, methodically pulling apart a bouquet, lost in grief. Marie wandered the streets in despair. "I shall not kill myself," she wrote, "but is there not one vehicle to make me share his fate?" Her children, too young to fully understand, continued playing, while she moved through life like an automaton. Her family grew concerned. She was indifferent to everything. But when the government offered a pension, she refused. "I am young enough to earn my living and that of my children." The Faculty of Science, recognizing her brilliance, made an unprecedented decision. On May 13, 1906, Marie Curie was appointed to Pierre's chair at the Sorbonne, becoming the first woman in France to hold such a position. Marie accepted her new role at the Sorbonne without ceremony, recalling Pierre's words, "Even if one has to go on like a body without a soul, one must work just the same." Yet work felt meaningless without him. Her diary reflected her sorrow. Spring's beauty only deepened her grief. Left alone, she clung to the past. One night, she burned Pierre's clothes, only to find remnants of his brain in the fabric. Overcome, she kissed them in despair. The morning after Pierre's funeral, Marie resumed her rigid composure. She moved to Sceaux, where Pierre had lived before their marriage and now rested. On November 5, 1906, she made history as the first woman to lecture at the Sorbonne. A packed amphitheater awaited her, but she gave no tribute, only science, picking up where Pierre had left off. Her life became an exhausting routine: research, teaching, and motherhood. Pale and gaunt, she rushed between Sceaux and Paris, eating little, rubbing her radium-burned fingers, and collapsing from sheer exhaustion. Despite financial security, life felt unbearably long. Her daughters, Irene and Eve, were raised with independence and discipline, mornings filled with lessons, afternoons spent cycling, swimming, and climbing. Though she shielded them from sorrow, she could not speak Pierre's name. She rejected wealth, donating her gram of radium to science rather than securing fortune. Marie, aging and frail, devoted herself to research. She published the 1910 treatise on radioactivity, compiled the works of Pierre Curie, and, with André Debierne, isolated radium metal, a feat never repeated. She established the first international radium standard, ensuring consistency in research and therapy. Despite her prestige, she remained indifferent to honors. In 1910, she declined the Legion of Honor, but controversially pursued a seat in the French Academy of Sciences. Opponents used her gender and false claims against her, and on January 23, 1911, she lost by 1 vote. She showed no reaction. That same year, she became the first person to win 2 Nobel Prizes, awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. But fame brought relentless scrutiny. The press, once celebratory, turned on her after a scandal emerged. In 1911, rumors surfaced about Marie's affair with Paul Langevin, a physicist and former student of Pierre. Langevin, a brilliant but unhappily married man, had secretly rented an apartment with Marie in Paris. His wife, Jeanne, discovered love letters between them and hired a private investigator who broke into the apartment and stole the correspondence. Furious, she threatened to expose them, and soon, French tabloids splashed the scandal across their front pages, labeling Curie a homewrecker and a disgrace to France. As the public outrage grew, Marie returned home from the Solvay conference in Brussels to find an angry mob outside her house in Sceaux, terrifying her daughters. Seeking safety, she took refuge in the home of Émile Borel, a fellow scientist, who was later accused of tarnishing French academia by sheltering her. The scandal worsened when Jean Langevin filed for divorce, setting a court date dangerously close to Marie's Nobel Prize ceremony in Stockholm. Some members of the Nobel Committee urged Curie to skip the ceremony, fearing embarrassment. But Albert Einstein encouraged her to go and claim her prize, dismissing the personal attacks as irrelevant to her scientific achievements. Marie, undaunted, attended the ceremony, sharing an 11-course dinner with the King of Sweden, despite the controversy. Days later, the Langevins settled their divorce. Jean gained custody of their children, and Paul retained visitation rights. Though the scandal permanently strained their relationship, Curie and Langevin remained on cordial and professional terms, their love affair quietly ending amid the public storm. Vilified in headlines, harassed by threats, and rejected as an outsider, she was used as a national symbol only when convenient. By late 1911, exhausted and gravely ill, she collapsed, requiring emergency surgery. She delayed treatment to attend a physics congress, prioritizing science over health. In 1912, she retreated to England with Mrs. Ayrton, finally receiving care and peace. Warsaw invited Marie to direct a new radioactivity lab, offering her a dignified return. Torn between her homeland and the Radium Institute in Paris, she declined full leadership but agreed to oversee the lab from afar. In 1913, she traveled for its inauguration, receiving a hero's welcome and embracing her former teacher, Mademoiselle Sikorska, as the crowd erupted in applause. That summer, she regained strength, hiking with Albert Einstein and her daughters. As they laughed at his thought experiments, she found a brief moment of peace. After years of delays, the Radium Institute finally took shape. Marie, refusing to profit from Pierre's death, saw progress stall until Dr. Roux of the Pasteur Institute forced action. By 1909, she secured leadership in radioactivity research, while Claude Rigaud oversaw cancer treatment. Marie personally designed the lab, ensuring ample light, space, and even an elevator, frustrating cost-conscious officials. She secretly planted trees and roses, nurturing the garden as she did her science. When she learned their old shed on Rue Lamont was being demolished, she visited one last time, finding Pierre's handwriting still on the blackboard, a silent echo of their past. By 1914, the Radium Institute was complete. Standing before its entrance, she recalled Pasteur's words, "Laboratories were temples of the future." This was hers, a place where science would serve humanity. Her joy was short-lived. As World War I erupted, Marie stayed in Paris, determined to protect her lab. But one treasure had to be secured, her gram of radium. Carrying the 20-kilogram lead case herself, she endured a grueling train journey to Bordeaux, placing it in a vault to keep it from enemy hands. Returning to an abandoned city, she saw the war's urgent need, X-rays. Understanding their potential to locate bullets and shrapnel without surgery, she pioneered mobile X-ray units, personally driving into battle zones, training nurses, and securing equipment. Overcoming bureaucratic hurdles, she converted 20 vehicles into battlefield radiology units, keeping one, a Renault truck, for herself. Her tireless efforts led to the establishment of 200 permanent X-ray stations, treating over 1 million wounded soldiers. Even after a near-fatal accident in 1915, she prioritized her X-ray plates over her injuries. Wearing only a Red Cross armband, she worked relentlessly, masking exhaustion with humor. Marie's daughters supported the war effort, with Irene eventually working in hospitals. Marie donated her Nobel medals, invested prize money in war loans, and trained 150 women in radiology, ensuring a new generation of technicians. She aided hospitals across Belgium, Italy, and the US, encountered skeptical surgeons, and won over allies like King Albert of Belgium. When the armistice was declared, she and her assistant Martha Klein celebrated by decorating the Radium Institute with makeshift flags and driving through jubilant streets in her battered X-ray car. For Marie, victory was personal. Poland had regained independence after 150 years. She reflected on her defiant youth and Poland's future, but the war left her physically depleted and financially strained. Her savings, invested in war bonds, were lost, forcing her to live on a modest professor's salary. Despite this, she resumed work immediately. She trained radiology apprentices, wrote the book Radiology in War, and ensured medical advancements continued. But while others received military honors, Marie's wartime service was soon forgotten. She had hoped for recognition as a soldier, but history saw only the scientist. Undeterred, she pressed on. Science was her true battlefield. By 1919, Marie resumed research at the Radium Institute, expanding radioactivity studies. As life stabilized, she focused on her daughters. Irene embraced physics, while Eve struggled to find her path. Despite her own burdens, Marie remained a devoted mother, cherishing simple joys, hiking, skating, and swimming, often encouraged by her athletic daughters. Summers in Lark West became her refuge. Among fishermen and scholars, she was simply Madame Curie. She joined their playful traditions, rowing alongside Jean Perrin and André Debierne, refining her swimming stroke under her daughter's guidance. Afterward, she sat in the sun, savoring dry bread and murmuring, "How good it is." In 1920, American journalist Mrs. William Brown Maloney met Marie, expecting a celebrated scientist, but finding a frail woman in a simple black dress. When asked what she needed most, Marie answered, "A gram of radium, but I cannot buy it." Moved, Maloney launched a nationwide fundraising campaign. Within a year, American women raised the funds, on one condition: Marie had to come to America to accept it. In 1921, Marie, at 54, reluctantly embarked on her first official tour. Overwhelmed by the New York reception, she endured relentless banquets and ceremonies, with Irene and Eve shielding her from the crowds. Unprepared for formalities, she arrived without an academic gown, prompting a tailor to craft one. At Carnegie Hall, women's colleges, and universities, thousands honored her. At one event, an admirer gripped her hand so tightly it left her injured, forcing her to continue with a bandaged wrist. On May 20, 1921, President Harding presented her with a gram of radium at the White House. Too exhausted to shake hands, she simply smiled. Realizing the radium would legally become her personal property, she insisted, "Not next week, not tomorrow, tonight." She signed the documents, ensuring it belonged to her laboratory. Marie's grueling tour continued, but exhaustion set in. Doctors ordered her to cancel appearances as newspapers lamented too much hospitality. Marie pays with her own flesh for our gift. She began exiting trains from the rear to avoid crowds, yet even at Niagara Falls, a reception committee awaited her. Despite her failing health, she endured, visiting Harvard, Yale, and Wellesley before finally departing on June 28th. By then, American newspapers had shifted focus to a boxing match, allowing her to slip away unnoticed. Though drained, Marie was quietly pleased. She had strengthened ties between America, France, and Poland. Yet seeing America's advanced medical facilities highlighted France's lack of resources. Had she and Pierre patented radium, could they have spared themselves such struggles? Still, she reaffirmed her belief: science must serve humanity, not profit. At 55, she realized she could no longer isolate herself in pure research. She was now the guardian of a revolutionary medical treatment. Despite her frail health, she embraced this role, traveling for scientific congresses and university ceremonies, marveling at flying fish in the South Atlantic, and tracing the Southern Cross in a foreign sky. Marie's influence spanned continents. She lectured in Rio de Janeiro, explored Spain with Eve, and debated physics at the Solvay Congresses in Brussels. Even in China, her portrait was honored in a Confucian temple. In 1922, she joined the League of Nations Committee on Intellectual Cooperation, advancing global science, standardizing research, and securing funding for young scientists. Though she had sacrificed financial gain, she advocated for scientists to benefit from industries built on their discoveries. Determined to bring scientific progress to her homeland, Marie led efforts to establish the Warsaw Radium Institute. Funding was scarce, but Brania spearheaded a national campaign, urging citizens to buy a brick for the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Institute. In 1925, Marie traveled to Warsaw to lay the cornerstone, an emotional homecoming filled with national pride. By 1929, she turned again to America, where Mrs. Maloney helped raise funds despite the economic crisis. On May 29, 1932, she inaugurated the Warsaw Radium Institute, a modern research center already treating patients, a symbol of her devotion to science and Poland. Her 1932 visit was her last. Writing to Eve, she reflected on the Vistula River's beauty, confessing it would stay with her until the end of her life. Despite growing prestige, Marie remained indifferent to fame. In 1920, the Curie Foundation secured research funding, and in 1922, she became a member of the Academy of Medicine of Paris, an unprecedented honor for a woman. France celebrated the 25th anniversary of radium's discovery in 1923 with a grand ceremony awarding her a lifelong pension. Yet she viewed public celebrations as burdens necessary to secure funding. She resented the fetishism of celebrity, feeling the world honored her past while offering little for her present work. Splendid work, people told her, but she felt as if she were already dead. Despite her fame, Marie lived modestly. Her Ile Saint-Louis apartment was vast but unadorned, chosen for its unobstructed view of the Seine over comfort. Eve tried to add warmth, but only a grand piano for her music was an indulgence. Her study, filled with scientific books and Pierre's portrait, was a space of memory and knowledge. Returning from travels, she arrived carrying a worn leather handbag of papers and fading flowers from admirers. Her souvenirs were humble: petrified wood from Texas, damascene blades from Toledo, Polish wool carpets, reminders of her journeys. Marie's home was rarely quiet. The hum of the Seine, Eve's piano, and their black cat filled the space. She rushed each morning to her lab, never keeping anyone waiting. Financially stable, she spent little on herself, preferring plants, stones, and quiet retreats where she could swim and garden. At meals, scientific discussions baffled Eve, who misinterpreted formulas as talk of special babies. In 1926, Irene's engagement to Frédéric Joliot disrupted their all-female household, but Marie welcomed him as another assistant in her scientific family. Despite exhaustion, Marie remained deeply engaged, researching, mentoring students, and supporting Polish scholars. Politically aware, she defended freedom and rejected violence in the name of progress. She never saw herself as a feminist icon, insisting her devotion to science was personal. While Eve embraced fashion, Marie mocked high heels and makeup, but shared a love for literature, especially Kipling and Colette. Restless even at night, she worked past midnight, counting in Polish as she tackled complex calculations, always driven by the pursuit of knowledge. Each morning, Marie arrived at the Radium Institute, where eager young researchers gathered around her. Though she never imposed authority, her influence was absolute. She had handpicked and guided every student. In her modest study, they nervously submitted manuscripts, knowing she would refine both their science and their writing. A rare, very good, or that's perfect, was the highest praise. Beyond research, Marie tirelessly secured funding, negotiated uranium supplies, and lobbied for grants, ensuring the institute thrived. Despite her formal demeanor, she inspired fierce loyalty. Assistants discreetly cared for her when she neglected herself, and even the handyman wept when she hired a chauffeur, fearing he was no longer needed. She found her greatest joy in 1934, when Irene and Frédéric Joliot discovered artificial radioactivity, a breakthrough that transformed science and medicine and won them a joint Nobel Prize, following in Marie and Pierre's footsteps. Marie's workload was relentless. Her secretary filtered the endless letters addressed simply to Madame Curie, Paris. She responded only to scientific inquiries, ignoring autograph requests and eccentric appeals. Disliking publicity, she limited interviews, avoided personal questions, and suffered stage fright before lectures. In rare quiet moments, she wrote scientific articles, textbooks, and a biography of Pierre. Marie had been slowly going blind from cataracts since 1920. Hiding her condition, she sought treatment under the alias Madame Curie, while Irene and Eve discreetly assisted her. In the lab, she adapted, using oversized lenses and relying on questioning rather than direct observation. Despite her declining health, she refused to slow down, driven by an unyielding devotion to science. Marie's body weakened, but her mind remained sharp. Multiple surgeries restored near-normal vision, and she continued her research, preparing actinium X at 2 a.m., marveling at glowing willemite ore, and wandering the garden in joy after a successful experiment. She ignored her worsening ailments, disregarding burns from radiation and dismissing alarming blood tests. In spring 1934, a road trip with Branya left her weakened. For the first time, she broke down, fearing she wouldn't finish her book, but by morning she composed herself and returned to Paris. Soon after, her final decline began. One May afternoon, feverish and weak, she admitted, "I have a fever and I must go home." Before leaving, she lingered in the garden. Sent to Saint-Elemo's sanatorium, she collapsed upon arrival. Doctors confirmed the truth: advanced pernicious anemia caused by prolonged radiation exposure. Drifting between delirium and acceptance, she muttered about publications and experiments. On July 3rd, she took comfort in the mountain air, believing it eased her suffering. Her final request: "I want to be let alone." At dawn on July 4th, 1934, Marie Curie passed away, her body succumbing to the very elements she had discovered. On July 6, 1934, Marie Curie was buried beside Pierre and Sceaux in a simple, private ceremony attended only by family, friends, and colleagues. A year later, her final book, Radioactivity, was published, a testament to the groundbreaking work that had defined her life. Though she had changed the world, few truly understood the personal cost of her discoveries. 60 years later, in 1995, Marie and Pierre were honored with interment in the Paris Pantheon, recognizing their extraordinary contributions to science. Their remains were sealed in lead-lined coffins due to lingering radioactivity. Marie became the first woman to be interred in the Pantheon on her own merits, a powerful symbol of her enduring legacy. So, what are your thoughts on the incredible life of Marie Curie? Her discoveries revolutionized science, but her story is just as remarkable as her work. She fought against the odds, shattered barriers, and left behind a legacy that still shapes our world today. What do you think about her groundbreaking research, her sacrifices, and the impact she left on modern science and medicine? Should she and Pierre have patented radium? Would her life have turned out differently if she had been born in another era, or in a world that better recognized women in science? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So drop a comment down below and let's keep the conversation going. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into history's most extraordinary figures. There are now over 20 deep dives on this channel exploring the lives of remarkable men and women throughout history, and I'd love to cover more of your choices. Let me know if there's anyone specific you'd like to see featured in a future video. Your suggestions help shape this channel. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, keep seeking the stories that move your soul.